guess we'll start this out. My name is Wes Wilson. I'm from the Shaft podcast, and I'm gonna try to moderate all these people. For those of you who are I guess kind of we're gonna talk a little bit to some of the people who don't know what podcasting is, as well as the people who are here to see these people in particular. But I guess I'll start by having everyone introduce themselves. First, we have Good from Mindcrack.
Hello, I'm Good from Mindcrack.
Who am I?
Your paws.
Hi.
Are you using this one?
Oh, right.
Hi, I'm Brent Copeland from the Dead Workers Party.
Hi, I'm Badge. I've got my own mic because I'm prepared. I'm also from Mindcrack.
I'm Chad. I'm from OMG Craft on the Twit Network.
So-
Family.
I hope so.
Yeah, like you
My
actually.
extended family's here in the audience tonight.
And for those of you who don't know, like This Week in Tech, Chad works with This Week in Tech also. So like he's as much podcasting as all of this end of the table has done. His level of professionalism like far exceeds all of us. So Chad's got a really unique perspective on this. So let's talk a little bit about podcasting. Like, does anybody remember when they first learned about podcasting and like sort of found out what it was like? Well, I mean, you know, I know that I was surprised when I first heard of podcasting. I'm like, wait, people are doing radio like normal people without stations, and I was kind of fascinated because I worked in college radio, and the idea of doing something like that was very appealing to me. And at the time, Eric and Brent were doing a podcast called World of WoW, and they're like, we're getting together and we're talking about WoW each week, and I'm like, that sounds amazing. I would love to join you doing that. How did you guys find out about podcasting?
So this would have been in 2006, 2007, and it's hard to actually kind of think about what the world of the internet was like back then. YouTube had just started, and the quality on YouTube was really bad. And I remember going, I'm Apple fanboy, now converted to misogynistic anything. And iTunes had brought podcasting to the iTunes radio, and that was a big deal because it would now sync with your iPod. You could keep your place, you know, where you had left it off. It seemed really fully baked, and this YouTube thing didn't seem that interesting. And as a high schooler who wanted to start a career in online media, it was like, well, that's the place to go for me.
My experience was kind of weird because the only podcast I've ever really listened to was The Shaft, and that was my introduction to podcasting, is The Shaft podcast. So now I'm on a panel with these guys, so that's kind of awkward.
I have no idea when I learned about podcasting, but the first podcast that I ever got into was the Rooster Teeth podcast, and then also the Shaft podcast. I used to listen to it while driving a forklift. Don't ever do that; it's dangerous.
For me, podcasting was something that was done by people that seemed to love the sound of their own voice, to be honest. It was not something I knew about, and then I would never listen to them. And it was only until I got into YouTube that I realized that it is the domain for the normal person. It's not something for someone extra self-obsessed. It is just a normal guy talking about things and other people wanting to hear what they say. So, but again, my experience of podcasts is limited pretty much to The Shaft.
And the first podcast I think I heard was In the Can, which was a film podcast, pretty small one, but we listened to it and we're like, we can do this, and what can we do a podcast on? And that's when we were like, well, we play WoW, let's do that, you know, and then it just kind of do more and more podcasts because they're really easy to do. Everybody should do one, I think.
While the mic goes down there, the first podcast I ever listened to was Fear the Boot, which was a tabletop role-playing podcast. I had never played a tabletop role-playing game, and I just liked the guys on it, and it was very much the listen to your own voice, but I really liked the sound of these guys' voice.
Well, and that's one of the things that I liked about podcasting is when I first started digging into them, I'm like, well, what kind of things am I interested in? I could go out and I could look. Wow, that got really loud. So I could go out and like I was a active role player and gamer, you know, and I'm like, well, why don't I go and see what kind of gaming podcasts are out there for tabletop or, you know, role playing games, things like that. And there were people in the industry talking about the things that they were doing. And you got kind of this sort of insider look at what was going on from people who were right there in the middle of it all. And I think that's one of the blessings and the curses of podcasting is that there are, like, you can get this glimpse on the inside, but also since there's these professionals talking about things, it's kind of hard to compete sometimes, you know? Like, you come out and you're like, well, I want to talk about games. And now I have, you know, my podcast is up against somebody who actually wrote the game. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So, well, speaking of, like, everybody should podcast, how do you guys record your individual shows? And, like, if somebody wanted to do a podcast, what's the minimum amount of investment they need to put into something like that?
I think the Minecraft podcast is the perfect example of the minimal amount of effort that can be put into a podcast. We just get in a Skype call. We put a doc together about 5 minutes before we record.
I put a doc together.
Pause puts a doc. This was Paul's idea, so really he should be putting the doc together.
It's a group effort. Help out.
So yeah, we just get in a Skype call and Paul records it and then uploads it to our channel, and it's minimal effort, sadly.
And still we fail most days.
I think the best software you can use is like DxTory, just because I don't know what Skype does, but it like levels out everyone. But on my end, it records the audio on a separate track, so I'm able to like reduce the sound levels and everything, so it sounds perfect. But and Audacity, if you guys, that's another free software to help out with audio problems if you ever run into them. So which one? Audacity.
Yeah, it's completely free and it's awesome. Once you get to learn it, it's a little bit kludgy and cookie cutter, but yeah, really great.
And really, like, we actually did a show at E3 on an iPhone, like, just recorded on the iPhone, and the audio was pretty good for 6 people standing around a phone just talking. In the end, I believe the content is king, and if the content's good and you're entertaining on it, that kind of trumps some of the audio issues that you may have. Yes, that was the Parking Lot Podcast. I'm not sure if you can find it on the internet. Maybe SoundCloud? Is that where we put it? I think so. It's out there somewhere. Maybe we'll apprise if someone can find it.
So, as you've started podcasting and you've started putting stuff up, what has been like the pluses and minuses of what you're like? What inspires you to keep doing it, and what kind of frustrates you and makes you want to quit? Let's start at the other end of the table.
So I have an interesting perspective on the podcasts that I make, is that they have a corporate backing that forces me to do podcasting. And so most of my woes would be like, oh, I haven't gotten the raise that I wanted this year.
Poor guy.
Right? No, I know. Yeah. On a personal level, when I was doing personal podcasting, discovery was by far the most difficult and frustrating thing, is that you would feel like you'd poured so much energy into this product, and truly, if you are putting out podcasts, there really isn't a great search engine. There isn't a great place to really be noticed, unless if you are the Ellen Show and can talk to iTunes directly and get them to feature you on the main page. Or talk to smaller apps that have now popped up. So that would be my biggest woe. In terms of biggest success, the direct connection with people. And at the company that I work for, we do everything live, and so there's a chat room that's there whenever we record, which is also a huge benefit. It's basically a prosthetic brain of they will be so much smarter than me at any given point, and also correct me whenever I'm wrong.
And it is a great resource, because when you have the chat room up, if you forget something, you just go, what's the name of that thing, chat room? And then you can turn away, and about 2 minutes later, somebody will pop, yes, that's that guy's name that was in that movie I'm trying to remember.
Right.
I think the biggest bugbear for us is the fact we've got Paws on the west coast of Canada, Good on the east coast of America and me in Europe, it's timing everything, getting us together, same time every week. It's a nightmare to coordinate. I think that's our biggest problem.
And can I just say, Skype? Why is it so difficult?
Yes.
Yes. And why has no one made anything better?
I know. Yes. Yes.
There's
Please,
a big
make
hole in the
better
market.
Skype. Someone.
Anyone else want to step in? Is everything beginning? And did you want to say something, Brent?
Yeah, I was just gonna say our biggest woe, I think, is tech issues. Like every week, it's something new. You think you do something every week for 6 years, 5 years, that you would have it down pat. But I swear, every week, XSplit, something happens. A webcam won't work, a mic, some audio issue. So it's just like, I wish there was something cheap and just would work every week. But and then things like this is, when you have.
This is Notch, and you're listening to.
That's like, when you get Notch to say and talk to you, I mean, that's awesome. And then, like, have people come watch you, fans and stuff. I mean, that's the great part about doing the podcast.
Well, and we discovered the Dead Workers Party has done a lot of podcasts, and we've discovered that we get the most audience response from podcasts that we point towards individual games. Like it's much harder to captivate an audience with general discussion or general gaming. But if we go, we're doing a Minecraft podcast or we're doing a Team Fortress 2 podcast, there are, like, for some reason, the people dive in. And, like, the response we get on these podcasts is really unbelievable. I know we really got surprised with our TF2 podcast because all the fans started sending us like they would write songs and play them on the guitar and send them to us, or they would, create art and send it to, and we're like, oh my gosh, what? And this is, I think fan art has sort of taken off a little bit more in the last few years, but like 4 or 5 years ago when we were doing TF2, the idea of getting fan art was we were just like, holy cow, what is going on? And that it was really refreshing. And then you're like, okay, well, I'd like to take this and do a general gaming show, and talk about gaming as a whole. And then the crickets just start chirping. And they're out there. They're listening to the show. People go, I love the show. But you don't have that constant feedback loop that you get when you're doing a really focused product on something that people are more passionate about.
And I may have a reason for that, and that's because mainstream media needs to be broad, and it needs to be able to collect everyone, and so they do that really well. So if there's anyone who is going to search on the internet for a general gaming stuff, that almost never happens because they're already satisfied with whatever the larger corporation is that's doing that. So if you are thinking about making a podcast, I would definitely say, or making really any internet property at the moment, be as specific as possible. Find a niche, fill it, and find a niche that you like, because there's a lot of really long days when it comes to making content. So yeah, I agree. Stay niche.
And I was just talking with Good. There's a different style of podcasting, and that's more personality driven. And I know that the Mindcrack podcast tends to be very general, but you guys get a lot of response because of your personalities and because people know you from something else. And then you guys getting together is kind of like a little audio party of all your favorite people.
I think that is it's a benefit of being more than one person. If you're on your own, you're bouncing off yourself, whereas with us, we can have these little pseudo-arguments going on and private jokes, and everybody likes that and gets into that. But
Mr. Winger.
nah. Mr. Vacation.
So what are there any benefits to, like, do you guys find that people coming to hear your personalities interact is like better or worse than people coming in to try and listen to what you have to say?
Well, I'm probably, earlier we were talking about people that would do podcasts. I'm probably one of the types that just does it to hear my own self talk, I guess. I made my own YouTube channel just to talk about stuff. So doing the podcast was like, yeah, we can just talk about stuff, and we don't even have to have video. We're just talking. So I think it's great, and the fact that we have such a good following of people that want to watch it or listen to it, not watch it, is awesome. That we can just talk about whatever is interesting to us each week, and people are there to listen to it and interact with us.
I think part of the generation of our podcast was the fact that me and Good used to spend quite long evenings on Skype just shooting the breeze about nothing for a long period of time. And we thought, well, we should really be recording this. And then Pause came along and said, let's do a podcast. And it kind of developed from there, really. But it was
Yeah,
just
that's exactly what happened,
yeah. all night. Like pub talk without the alcohol.
Worst idea ever.
So what? Let's see. How do you guys think your podcasting has evolved? Like, how do you think you've changed as you've gone on, or how your product has changed as you've gone on?
I have no idea how we changed. I don't think we have. We've just been like, we've just been the same. We just pretty much get the information every week, and then we just get the questions. And I don't know, nothing's really changed about us. I don't think.
I think that the truth is that probably we should have changed and become a lot more professional in the year and a half we've been making our podcast.
Professionalism, I don't know.
No, don't. No. I would say if, especially for someone who's starting out, just getting in front of a mic or a camera and talking, podcasts are a really good way just to do that. Most of if your numbers are small, that might even be a good thing. The first podcasts that I did still are out there, and they still only have less than 100 downloads. And that was just time, that was just flight time to try to be able to speak coherently until something bigger came along, and then you could use that previous time to an advantage. So that's, I mean, in the beginning it was horrible, and now I hope it's not horrible.
I know one of the biggest things that changed with us is when we first started doing the podcasts, we would micro edit this stuff. Like, we would record 2 hours of audio and then spend seriously like 10 to 15 hours editing these things. Because we thought, oh man, we're like and awing, and we got to cut those out. So you'd go through and cut 2 hours of edit, and then you'd cut out little spaces, and then finally we did it so bad to when it sounded like robots talking. It was the worst thing in the world, and we were like, okay, we're just morons. Like, we don't even, like, so now the editing has gone like way down. Like, usually it's about 15 minutes just editing, and that's just kind of trimming ends. And you just let the content go, and you just kind of learn that you don't need to like micro edit these things.
What's this edit word? I don't understand.
Exactly. Don't edit.
Well, and I know, like, when I started Core Elements up, and I was interviewing game designers, I was editing my own product. There were some times where I did edit out some very long ums, and I felt, because it was one of these things where it's like I wanted to come out of the gate, you know, looking really good, and I would be sitting there with kind of nervous with these, you know, game designers. I'd be like, so, and I did edit those out, but I also, after you do it for a while, you start getting radio voice. You start getting to where you don't need to edit out the ums because you're not doing them as much, or you figured out a way to pace them in a fashion where they're not as annoying. I know one interesting thing. Oh, I really? Oh, okay. I don't know. It wasn't as annoying though, was it? Anyway.
Absolutely not.
Now I lost my train of thought. That's another thing that, like, we've experienced as we've gone on. Like, with me, Brent, and Eric in the same room podcasting, we have a certain chemistry about us, and we'll get our guest on Skype. And it's kind of difficult necessarily to get the kind of cues that a very clever conversation requires over Skype. You can get a little bit of it, you know, from the visual stuff on there, but like Good came and joined us last weekend in the studio, and it was just a hilarious show because we were all there feeding off each other, making each other laugh. There was no Skype lag. You didn't end up with that back and forth. We were trying to figure out who's supposed to talk. And it can make a real world of difference to have everybody in the same room. Skype is an amazing tool, though. Like, I watch, you know, I'm able to interview famous I'm like hanging out with Edmund McMillan on Skype call, and I'm like, wow, you're Edmund McMillan. You know, you're Jonathan Blow. So there's another Now I'm going to notice them the whole time. You're going to do that to me. Where do you think podcast is going on the whole? Do you think and I've had this conversation with both Brent and Chad that. So why don't we start down there, Chad? Where do you think podcasting is going on the whole, and what do you think that we can do to make it better?
Right. So it requires a tiny history lesson. It goes back to iTunes, adding podcasts, and iTunes is still, for most podcasts, 70% of their downloads. So it's a big market. Back in 2007, this was great for everyone. iTunes didn't have content on their store. They had not made deals with the movies or TV shows that they have now. And fast forward to today, when they have TV shows and movies and albums, LPs that are fancy looking, they make a lot of money off their iTunes stores, apps and stuff like that. And there's much less of an incentive for iTunes to promote free podcasts. There's a big liability. We are just bozos up here making stuff that goes on their site, and they have a responsibility to keep that moderated. So in the past few years, you can see that Apple, who's been the biggest driver of podcasts so far, has kind of waned a bit in how much they support the platform. And it's called podcasting. Like remember the iPod? Everyone associates podcasting with iPods. And so that's been distressing. Luckily, there's been a resurgence of people who are doing it on their own and making apps, and there's really, Stitcher Radio is kind of a new style of podcast app. There's lots and lots of new ways to consume podcasts, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for. You have to dive in and be, I need to go find that app so that I can watch that podcast that I've been watching for 5 years already, because otherwise, how are you going to know? I mean, none of us have big marketing budgets to promote podcasts. So that's also distressing. So moving forward, I would hope that podcasting will find a new platform from these apps. Either there is a new platform that sort of works across all devices, which is kind of an issue, is right now a lot of these apps, there are features that they're missing that are really required if you want to get deep into podcasting, like syncing across all devices, sort of how Netflix does it, or streaming like YouTube does it, or maybe even switching between quality versions, which is impossible on every app. There isn't a way to say, I'm watching the 480p and I want to switch to the 720p because I have better bandwidth. And so these issues kind of need to get ironed out, I think, for podcasting to move forward. As probably many of you know, YouTube seems to be the future of online video and any sort of media platform moving forward, which is a little sad because there is the format of a podcast does live within the constraints of features that are within apps like iTunes and podcasting apps, and they're generally longer form. I mean, there's a big argument to be made that podcasting is way different than making YouTube videos. I mean, even if you wanted to watch a podcast on YouTube, if you're in the car, you have to keep the screen on the whole time and be buffering video the whole time, which is kind of a big bummer. So moving forward, the future, I hope that some of these apps, either one app will reign supreme and be the best platform, and you can go and look at it online, just like with Netflix, where you could just watch your podcast online, pause, open it up on your phone, watch it, and that's kind of the platform that podcasting, I think, needs to survive, because I don't think Apple will be the arbiter of podcasts moving forward.
Listening to you talk, I've realized that basically we should just quit. We're not qualified. The reason why I say this is because we put our podcast on YouTube only, and the reason for that, sad to say, is money. We don't have any sponsors or anything like that. We don't have any ads that we, direct sell through our podcast at any point, so we're not doing any advertising while we speak. And we started the podcast as a way to pay for our server and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a group fund type of thing. So we're making money from the ads that roll through YouTube, and so that we only put our podcast it probably shouldn't even be called a podcast because it's not on iTunes, but it's only on YouTube, and that's solely so that we can get the ad revenue to pay for our group stuff through the video.
You should talk.
Okay. Well, we felt. I've talked to the Shaft guys a lot about, like, you know, the Netflix or Audible and stuff like that, and we've talked about it as a group, and we keep saying we don't really want to do it, but
That's another. Here, do you mind if I steal?
No. Go.
That's another big issue, is that most people who are starting something today want to monetize. They need a platform that they can monetize, and YouTube does it really well. There's absolutely nothing in terms of monetization for podcasts. Why doesn't a company be the AdSense of podcasts? And to answer, that rhetorical question, is that it's really difficult because at the moment the platform works off of direct sales, where Wes or I or someone else will say, hey, I'm a huge fan of Squarespace or Audible.com or whatever. And doing that is very difficult, and many companies will not trust someone to be able to sell their products like that. In fact, I mean, I have, if there's a new advertiser on any of my shows, there are multiple day-long meetings to make sure that they're happy with who I am, and I'll do the ad correctly. And so that's a huge issue. Moving forward, what would be the best for everyone is this legendary alpha app that I'm talking about, this alpha platform, also becomes the AdSense of podcasting. To either say, we can hand you an ad that you put somewhere in your podcast, and using a music track, what is that, Smule or no, not, what's the thing where you hit the button and you can tell what music is playing? Shazam, SoundHound, yeah. So there's that sort of algorithm built in, so they can say, yes, your ad played right here, we know that it played, and it's embedded into your video. Something like that needs to happen, because for anyone, even if I wasn't connected with a corporation that could go out and do these ad sales, I wouldn't be making any money. And then the fallback on that is that everyone chooses Audible, Netflix, any affiliate ad that they can get who trust podcasters to say stuff online, which that means that every single podcast is advertising like 3 companies, which is great for those 3 companies, but not really great for the consumer. It's not great for us. It's not great. I mean, once again, not great for the consumer. Like, you guys don't want to hear an Audible ad again.
That's no joke. I spent an entire summer trying to contact companies to get some. Because our numbers for the Shaft podcast were at our high point were really through the roof. The numbers Brent were giving me for our downloads on the Shaft were higher than the circulation of every newspaper on the planet other than the top 10. And yet, those newspapers were able to call up Bill's Clothing Warehouse and stick a crappy black and white ad in the corner of their newspaper that nobody was necessarily going to pay attention to. But all the studies I had read on podcasting were saying these are people who have chosen the media. They don't skip anything. They're extremely loyal. They will shop with the people who advertise with, on their favorite podcasts. But I couldn't get anybody to bite. It was, and you would go and do research on like ad people were writing, podcasting is the next frontier for advertising, but nobody would buy. And I even got kind of smart. I'm like, okay, let's see. Doghouse Systems is advertising with The Instance. They're sponsoring The Instance. Why don't I talk to their competitors and say, hey, look, your competition is advertising here. Why don't you advertise here? And people treated me like I was alien. Like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to me about this? And monetizing is extremely difficult. It was very hard. I think, Brent, when you were the one that told me, I think we're kind of on the forefront of this.
Yeah, when we first tried to, get sponsors and stuff, it was like no one really listens to you because it's just the numbers are hard, I think, to really explain to folks. They're used to one system of getting numbers. Getting logs off a computer tells you one thing. And podcasting, when someone downloads a file, it actually downloads it in like pieces. So you don't know, depending on how they download it and what service, how many times it's actually being counted. Is it 1 time or is it 6 times? So there's services that kind of know the formula, supposedly, even though they all vary differently. And so it's hard to give people these numbers and them to be believable. So then they just don't like that. So really we went to affiliates, and affiliates seem to be the way that you can track that. You know, it's, yes, someone signed up for this, that worked, you know. So I think that's pretty much the way to go if you're looking to monetize anything. But like Chad was saying, it's like, do you really want to do I'm sick of talking about Netflix, but I love them because they're a great service, you know. Should I say the link? No, I won't do that to you.
Well, why don't we take some questions from you? Is there anything else I really need? Is there anything else? Do you want to take some questions? I think we got like 10 minutes. Anybody have any questions?
All right, great stuff, gang. Like a marketing tip from each of you, maybe low-hanging fruit or something that worked best for you to get your following?
I would say niche is huge, and then take the next step and do basically what's in the normal marketing handbook. Is go to forums, say, hey, we have this new product. I'd love to know what you think. Try to find influencers in that field and just share it to them. You know, don't be a douche. You know, just be like, hey, this is new. I'd love to have your opinion, and move on from there. Finding a niche could be just a whole freaking panel in itself, because like I know with Scam School, Brian Brushwood, you know, he wanted to be, you know, there's magicians, everyone knows what a magician is, but he wanted to be the internet magician, and that was a niche that hadn't been filled yet, and so that's what he went after. So just by niche doesn't mean like you need to do a podcast on dog leashes. You can have a bigger idea for your niche, but make sure it's not filled yet. Or if it is filled, what is your angle on it? What sets you apart is what I would suggest.
I'm not qualified to answer that.
A lot of things is, you know, be yourself and grow with your audience. Really work with the community. Like talk to them, get their feedback on what you're doing, and listen to what they like and what they don't like, and listen to it, but don't like. Just because one guy says, I hate you, don't stop doing it. You know, keep going on with it. But the community is a huge aspect, I think, of everything we do. So I think community is a big focus.
I think Bash said it best, but yeah, like, I don't know. For us, it was just more of just getting together and talking about stuff. So we don't really have like anyone we're targeting or anything like that. But for community stuff, like the things we do is taking questions that people want to ask us, and then we answer that at the end of the podcast. That's pretty much what we do. So,
Reddit. Take your podcast to the subreddits and say, hey, I've got this show, post it every week. You might get 2 comments. They both might be terrible, but just keep going, and eventually people will pay attention to you.
Perseverance is a big thing, I think. Because the market is saturated with pretty much anything you do. I think whatever you do, you're going to have very few views at the start, and I think you need to keep, as you say, going on the Reddits, going on whatever, and just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
And one last thing on that, I think one of the hugest thing in doing a show, and really this follows, I think, on YouTube, on podcasting, is consistency. Like if you start a show and you do it 1 week, and then you wait a month to do the next one.
It's okay.
People will think
talking to
you're
me
going
too.
away, you know. But if you do it every week or every month at least, and keep going, consistency. Just keep doing it. Same time, same place.
And there is something to that. Like my Core Elements show that I'm very proud of, I can't get out every week because I interview game designers. And getting a game designer to come on your show anytime within a month of PAX is really difficult. But
you're consistently inconsistent.
Exactly.
It works,
Yes.
it works.
But Brent's right in that if you are putting out a product and you're able to put it out on a weekly basis, it's just like the streamers who are able to do their streaming at exactly the same time each week. you know they're there. You're going to go back and get it, and it's going to become part of your weekly ritual. Is getting that information. So, anybody else have any questions? Okay, here we go.
You were talking about the generalizing niches and stuff, and this is mostly for Eric and Wes, but did you have that issue with Core Elements?
I kind of came up with Core Elements as a rejection of some things that were not going well with other podcasts. We were doing another show, and there were some parts of it that Brent was not happy with. But I kind of liked them. So I was like, okay, why don't I take the parts that Brent doesn't like, and then we can do something else that he does like, and I'll do this sort of stuff. And then at the time, I was also trying to get video game designers to come on our shows and talk to us, but it was really, really hard to do. So I kind of thought, well, why don't I make a show about game designers? And the other thing was I kind of wanted to take the idea of gaming as a life experience, as something that enhances your life, as something that, you know, everything you do in your life is a reflection a little bit of gaming, and look at it that way. And so, like, my mission statement when I made Core Elements is actually remarkably similar to the way I'm running it now. It's just I had a much more produced, showy idea at the beginning that I have since whittled down into just basically a long interview.
To help you out, there's basically two really great areas to go for. Is either if you just want to make a podcast and don't know what you wanted to make it about, aim for a niche. Oh, other than that, aim for a passion. And I think Core Elements for you is a passion. And so it may not fall directly into that niche category, but you're going to make it no matter what, and it's going to be great because no one else can make it the way you make it. Is what I would say. That's probably where Core Elements falls.
But general gaming is a really difficult area. It is, the crickets chirp all the time, and you're exactly. We had that problem with Nation of Gamers. Like, we had gotten this huge response from our TF2 podcast, Control Point, and then we went into Nation of Gamers, and we wanted everybody to respond. Let's get more questions here. Hold on. Anybody else? Okay, here we go.
Hey guys, this is fantastic, really fascinating. What other podcasts do you like or, listen to?
Educational podcasts are by far my favorite. Hardcore History by Dan Carlin, How Stuff Works. I'm in love with science podcasts. On top of that, I'm unfortunately living in the world of podcasts so much that it's literally wake up to fall asleep. I'm living in podcasts. So my own tech podcasts that I produce are probably the other thing. Yeah, yeah.
I really don't listen to very many podcasts at all. The only one I do listen to on a regular basis is the BBC Radio Mark Commode Movies one, which if you like anything about movies, you have to listen to. They are fantastic.
I actually don't listen to many anymore, but like Twed, I'll still catch Twed a lot of times. Mark Watson, I think that's his name, is a comedian that does one that I like. And then is it Smodcast is one that's pretty good. Of course, Minecraft, but
Liar.
I have to look at it on YouTube all the time. But we're gonna fix that, right?
Maybe. But I know Goo's gonna roll his eyes, but I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast like almost every single time it comes out, just because he has like so many interesting different guys. Don't. You're nodding your head, but he just has like all these interesting guys that come up on, and is someone booing? I can't hear that. Oh God. But no, just I don't know, just he just has so many interesting guys that go on. Yeah, I love Joe Rogan. Okay, I'm not afraid to admit it, Good.
The Shaft is really the only podcast I listen to, and I don't listen to that as regularly as I used to. I used to listen to it when I would mow grass, and now I don't have time to mow grass anymore. So we live in a jungle of tall grass, and there's no more podcasts for me.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Let's do it.
I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, but I've kind of toned it down a little lately. I focus, my main ones, like the ones I listen to when they first come on, Skeptoid is an amazing podcast, a little 15-minute thing about about conspiracy theories and urban legends and all that kind of stuff. I love This American Life. I can't get enough of that. And I mean, a lot of the NPR stuff. I listen to a lot of that. So, Gamers with Jobs conference call is one of the best general gaming podcasts in the world. Those guys, like, they're able to play games the week they come out and talk about them coherently. And whereas I'm like, oh wait, I bought The Witcher 2 a year ago. Maybe I should finally play it and talk about it, you know? So, okay, more questions.
Hey guys, love the panel so far. My question is, do you guys have any words of advice for people who are doing podcasts on Skype and how to keep it flowing and in a regular format or so?
I would say what I ended up doing was giving everyone Audacity, which is really easy because it's free, and then having them record on their end so that if Skype did some hiccup where you sound like you're a Cylon or something, you still have a clean version on their end that you can save something. And at the beginning of the thing, you know, all of you clap or whatever so that you can see how waveforms work on the multiple PCs that you're recording on, or Macs. Audacity works on both. And then sync those up. That also helps if, say, one person recorded their levels too low or their mic was too low, and there's no way to fix that once it's embedded in Skype to you. So that's what I would suggest. There's always going to be those awkward pauses when you're using a video stream.
One thing I do every time we have a guest on Core Elements, I tell them, I go, look, you're the guest, you have right of way. If you have something to say it. Talk, we will back down. Give somebody right away. That way you don't have that awkward where you're trying to figure out who's going to talk. One guy is basically going to talk and the other people are going to respond.
There's a chemistry thing as well. The 3/4 of us on Mindcrack, we talk to each other a lot. So we know when somebody's going to shut up and when someone else can drop it in. When you have a guest, it tweaks it slightly, and that's kind of the problem we were talking about with the Shaft podcast earlier, is when you've got 3 guys in the studio and one extra guy that's never worked with them before, there is that sort of, I don't know if you're going to stop talking, and especially without video. So working with people you know helps a lot.
Curious, we're starting to see the early stages of in-dash podcasting, with cars being able to get that. I'm curious if any of you are looking at that and if that's changing the way you're doing format to sort of match terrestrial.
Yes. So in-dash is basically car systems that crappy LCD screen that you have in your car now has Honda and Ford and some people are creating apps that integrate with that. It's very interesting at the moment. It seems like it's almost sponsored apps or sponsored podcasts. So you have to be big enough for them to like you, for them to put you on their system. But it's super fascinating because historically podcasts have been mostly audio, and it's the perfect thing to listen to in the car. And so it really makes a lot of sense. What I truly think is that it's too late, is that car manufacturers are not going to be able to stay up to the status quo of wherever we will move next. And you're going to have this 3-year-old kludgy podcast app that's never been updated in your dashboard, and you're going to have a smartphone that can render the moon, and you're just going to use your smartphone no matter what. So I don't think it's the future. It's very interesting. I'm glad that they're doing it. To me, I'm just like, I'm glad that you're promoting podcasts. So someone buys a car and they're like, what is a podcast? Let me go find that out.
I know nothing.
I've looked in a few newer things just because it's like you're saying, the podcast is kind of going away from iTunes a little bit. Just iTunes has kind of stopped dropping certain things and making it like where instead of like pinging them and letting them know the podcast is there, they're just like, oh, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it, because they don't really want to worry about it anymore, I don't think. So things like SoundCloud has been doing something. They're doing a beta for podcasting, which I think is an awesome idea, getting feedback right there in the audio. And so I would assume they would be working on an app to do something like that. But also I think like iHeartRadio has a way to get your podcast now on that. And I think that's kind of maybe part of that car thing too. So there's a few things, like you said, I think the apps are going. So I haven't looked into the car directly, but into those apps that may be going to the same thing.
I had no idea that cars were promoting podcasts or anything like that. So
There's only 2 manufacturers, I think, at the moment that are really doing it well. So yeah, it's obvious that someone might miss it.
I have a question about guests. A lot of podcasts have guests, and so I want to know how you guys go about finding guests, selecting them, what makes a good guest, what makes a bad guest.
So this is basically my job at TWiT. Is we have a show called This Week in Tech where every week we have to get at least 3 guests. And then we also do This Week in Google and MacBreak Weekly, where normally I try to get at least 1. So at any given week, I'm wrangling at least 5 guests, upwards of 10. A Rolodex helps so much. Just being able to send in, just being able to contact the person is many times the hardest. I have a advantage that I'm normally trying to contact tech reporters, and they tend to have their email freely available. So if you can get an email, that's the best. And be as honest as you can, and keep it short. So I would suggest looking up pitching tutorials, how to pitch someone, and just Google that and follow that sort of style of you want to keep it within 5 lines. Let them know what you're asking for, let them know what you're doing, and then give them links to research it on their own. And they will decide. Be prepared for a no, or in most cases, an ignore. And I've now in the past started, or in the current times, is I will follow up. I'll just say, hey, just pinging you a second time. Wanted to know if you got this. And many times they'll be like, I guess I'll respond to this guy. Just be as polite as you can. Twitter, Facebook, any of those other networks, you can do about the same thing except in a limited capacity, which doesn't make it as good as email.
Well, whenever you were on our podcast, Brian, Brian's the one that asked the question, Dr. Lorgon 111 over there. You were probably our most professional moment ever in organizing a guest, because I think I talked to you twice before you were on within a week. So normally if we don't have a guest within 5 minutes of the podcast, we mention it in Skype. Does anyone want to join us? And that's as far as we go. But we should not be talking about our podcast. Do not use us use us as an example of what not to do. Pretty much.
Chad is Coca-Cola. We are the guy on the corner with a homemade lemonade.
Basically, what Good was saying, for us, I was talking about how our podcast is mostly just friends talking together. So we met Brian at PAX, and we thought that we all talked well together. So why not bring him on the podcast? So that's how we choose our guests. We don't go out and just ask random people like that, because that's not what we do. Like I said, just friends getting together and chatting about what the heck's going on in the world. And
that's our niche.
Yeah, that's our
niche. Unprofessionalism.
Unprofessional.
We need to wrap it up.
Okay, we're over. So we should wind down. We're 7 minutes over, but we'll be wandering around. Everybody can come and say hello, and I appreciate everybody coming, and listen to podcasts.
Congratulations.